Welcome to The Explainer. Picture this. It's the absolute height of global anxiety, and suddenly a totally different pathogen pops up and terrifies the world. Today, we're unraveling the mystery of an unexpected tragedy that triggered a massive wave of fear. It's a pretty wild look at what actually happens when a sudden medical emergency collides with viral internet rumors. We're going to break down exactly what went down, separate the cold, hard virology facts from the wild social media speculation, and, just look at the fascinating science behind those scary headlines.
Okay, let's dive into this. Transport your mind back to the spring of 2020. The whole world was basically paralyzed by the fear and uncertainty of COVID-19. We're talking unprecedented lockdowns starting, everyone glued to their screens, and honestly, the collective anxiety of the planet was just off the charts. And then, right in the middle of all that extreme tension, news of another, completely different virus breaks. For a public that was already totally on edge, it was literally the worst possible timing.
The inciting incident here was just as sudden as it was tragic. So in March 2020, a man from Yunnan province in China was just making a routine trip back to work. He was on a chartered bus with over 30 other passengers when, out of nowhere really, his health rapidly deteriorates. The situation escalated incredibly fast. They sought medical help, but tragically, he passed away shortly after, right there on his journey. It was a terrifying, deeply unsettling event, and it immediately set off major alarm bells for both the authorities and the general public.
Right after his sudden passing, authorities obviously rushed to run tests and figure out what caused such a rapid, fatal decline. Well, the results came back, and they revealed he was infected with something called hantavirus. Now, because the world was already living in this deep, existential dread of the coronavirus, this specific piece of news spread like wildfire online. People were absolutely terrified. They were sharing the story endlessly, genuinely believing that a brand new epidemic was crashing the party right on the heels of COVID-19.
And naturally, all that massive viral panic created a huge gap in actual knowledge. The internet was absolutely flooded with fear, but severely lacking in facts. You know how it is? Social media just thrives on a media alarm. But the reality of virology, that requires a methodical, calm approach. So we really need to ask the crucial questions here. What exactly is this hantavirus? Where in the world did it come from? And if we step back from the online hysteria for a second, is it really a massive danger to humans?
Now, what's really interesting here is what completely changes the narrative. Hantavirus was not some brand new, unknown threat that just sprang up to catch humanity off guard in 2020. Not at all. It's actually a known, entirely distinct, and admittedly dangerous virus that is mostly found in rats, mice, and other rodents. It has its own totally unique lineage. In fact, its name actually gives away its geographic origin. It's named after the Hantan River in South Korea, which is completely separate from where the coronavirus originated.
Truth is, the scientific and medical community has known about this thing for decades. Let's go back to the 1970s. This highly unusual, strange disease started appearing among thousands of soldiers stationed near that very same Hantan River. These guys were coming down with severe illness. We're talking hemorrhagic fever and acute kidney issues. It was a massive medical mystery back then. It actually took years of rigorous, methodical detective work for researchers to finally isolate the virus from a local species called the striped field mouse. Because of that historical outbreak and all the intense study that followed, medical experts actually already had a really profound, solid foundation of knowledge about hantavirus way before the whole 2020 social media frenzy.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the virus is so incredibly tricky to identify at first. Initially, the symptoms are super deceptive. They basically hide in plain sight by masquerading as the common flu. An infected person might just get a fever, some deep body aches, general fatigue, maybe a headache. But if the disease actually progresses and takes hold, the reality gets terrifying. The virus can trigger this massive immune response that causes blood vessels in the lungs to literally leak. The lungs fill with fluid, causing profound respiratory damage and severe difficulty breathing. This stark escalation really highlights why it's such a serious, life-threatening condition.
So how does someone actually catch it in the first place? Unlike the coronavirus, which had us all terrified of anyone coughing near us, the scientific reality of hantavirus transmission is completely different. It primarily jumps to humans through environmental exposure to rodents. Here's how it typically goes down. An infected mouse or rat leaves droppings or urine in a dark, quiet corner. Think basements or sheds. Over time, that stuff dries out. Later, you come along, maybe sweep the floor, and kick up this invisible, microscopic dust.
That dust is loaded with active aerosolized viral particles. You breathe in that contaminated mist, and boom, the virus goes straight into your respiratory system.
So the crucial point is this one single fact that instantly deflates all of that 2020 social media panic. Experts confirm that hantavirus usually does not spread easily from person to person. You aren't going to catch it just by standing next to someone or sitting near them on a bus. That man from Yunnan province, he was tragically a victim of environmental exposure, likely breathing in that infected rodent dust somewhere. But it was incredibly unlikely he was going to spark an outbreak among his fellow passengers. Hantavirus just doesn't have that easy human-to-human transmission capability that causes massive global pandemics.
Let's move on and see how this builds into practical, everyday advice. Because it's so closely tied to rodents and your environment, protecting yourself is highly actionable and totally within your control. Experts heavily emphasize taking special care with general cleanliness, just to keep rodents away from where you live and work. Naturally, stay as far away from rats and mice as you can. But here's the absolute biggest takeaway. If you are ever sweeping or cleaning out an enclosed, dusty space where rodents might have been hanging out, like an old shed, a garage, or a basement, wear a mask. It is highly, highly recommended to stop you from inhaling those dangerous aerosolized particles. Now, it's really important we keep things in perspective here. Cases of hantavirus are thankfully super rare. You definitely don't need to be walking around just terrified of it every single day. But rarity doesn't mean we just ignore it. As we saw with the tragic story of the man on the bus, when you do contract this disease, it is incredibly dangerous. It strikes fast, it escalates with barely any warning, and it can change your entire life or end it in an absolute instant. It definitely demands our respect, awareness, and just a bit of practical caution when we're dealing with those dusty, enclosed environments. Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We've seen how one tragic, isolated incident, when mixed with intense global anxiety, basically brewed up a massive storm of viral misinformation. But by taking a step back and really looking at the actual science and history of the hantavirus, we brought ourselves right back to reality. So, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Before the whole panic of 2020, or even before checking out this explainer, had you ever actually heard of hantavirus before? Keep exploring, stay curious, and always look for the facts behind the fear.